hour. It's a very important topic we are addressing. We are talking about our sister Assata Shakur and what is happening with Assata Shakur. We've not seen or heard from Assata in a long time. And because of that, the imperialists are spreading mass propaganda, blaming the Cuban Revolution for Assata's whereabouts. So we are definitely going to be talking about that today and clearing the air on that confusion. So we're glad that you have decided to join us to participate in this very important topic, because the idea behind it is that you can get this information and you can spread to people the truth about what is happening with our sister. And this helps us stop these lies about the Cuban Revolution, because one thing that US imperialism wants to work overtime to do is turn the African masses within the US against the Cuban Revolution, because we have always been and we will always be the most likely element within this country that will rise up against this country. So since they know that, they don't want us to have a model from which to base our struggle on, and the Cuban Revolution without question provides that model. So they want to do everything to turn us against the Cuban Revolution. And the most recent tactic to do that is to spread slander against the Cuban Revolution about what's happening with Sister Assata Shakur. So that's what we'll be talking about today. We give thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, as always, and we give thanks and honor to our African ancestors, who are the very reason that we're here. And thank you all for joining us today for this critical topic. So we'll get started with our introductions so that we can get underway. And our Ancestors' Voices, this program, is of course sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP, okay? And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define succinctly as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. That is the definition of Pan-Africanism. That's what we are fighting for. That is, we believe, the solution to the problems that African people face, who are scattered and suffering in 120 countries all over the world, all 2 billion of us, no matter what language we speak, what food we eat, what religion we practice, what fraternity or sorority we pledge, what gang we belong to. We will never be free until Africa is free, united, and socialist. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which you see on the top right of the page on the right. And that book outlines our strategy to unite all of the liberation movements on the African continent who agree with that objective of Pan-Africanism as one unified socialist Africa, and to unify all of those entities into an all-African committee for political coordination, AACPC. And then once that is a reality, we will from there have the All-African People's Revolutionary Party and the All-African People's Revolutionary Army. That is the strategy that Nkrumah lays out in his book. And you see there the logos of some of the many liberation movements on the continent that we have been working with for a number of years to bring about this reality. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu Umi, and my daughter, Shakura Umi. We are both active organizers within the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. So again, we thank you for joining us today for this presentation on what's happening with our sister Assata Shakur. Where is she, and how we don't want you to believe the lies coming out of US imperialism about where she is and what that means within the Cuban Revolution. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And as we do that, Shakur is going to open us up as she always does. So I'm going to turn it over to her to get us started.
Thank you so much. Greetings, all greetings. We hope you are well. We hope you are maintaining your best strength that you know how. I'm so excited to talk about our comrade Assata, because I think that, you know, we've had different seminars where we have focused on the importance of acknowledging our political prisoners. And we've had many opportunities to remind folks of ways that, you know, we all should be engaging in that work. So whether we are writing letters to our comrades who are wrongfully accused and locked up, or if we are, donating to causes of their choice, like whatever that looks like, especially if we're not in organizations, the next best thing would be to engage in some other way. Maybe we're supporting people who are in organizations. However, we're doing that. This continues to be a critical point, and we don't want to leave Assata out of that conversation, even though this comrade was very successful in escaping US incarceration and a US prison system. We still want to honor and support this comrade because they're still very much under attack. And even though there's nothing that can stop Assata because she is invincible, we still need to talk about what's happening, and we still need to be aware of what's happening and be aware that each year, I would say additionally, that she is not within the US's reach is more of an opportunity for people to continue to commodify and to properfy, if you will, this person, this human being, as if they were worth a certain bounty or amount of money. And that's precisely what they have tried to do. So, just continuing to remind us that we don't live in a humane society. We don't live in a society that values human beings and sees life as a benefit. And we certainly don't live in a society where a person like Assata Shakur could push back against systems of oppression and be rewarded for that, but instead be shamed and be pitted and wrongfully accused and incarcerated. And then when she is able to find a way to escape, there is nothing but anguish and further dehumanization towards trying to recover and regain lost property, for lack of a better term. So, we start off by honoring our comrade. And before this comrade was known as Assata, the birth name was Joanna Chesmard. And in the 60s, this comrade understood that there were many, many problems that existed in the world, and not only was discussing those problems with other activists that Assata was engaged with, but also was trying really hard to figure out ways to do something about it. We quote all the time that Kwame Ture says that organization decides everything. And this comrade was aware of that quote, was very much aware of that quote, because that would further explain not just why they joined the Black Panther Party, but also how they wanted to join organizations that were collectively organizing as a method to do something about said problems that were noticeable and that were identified, right? And so Assata knew, I am talking about these problems, poverty, or I'm talking about these problems, economic inequitable welfare, right? I'm talking about these problems of racism, sexism, things like that. I'm also noticing that other people are talking about these problems too. I'm not going to get anywhere just talking about them with myself. I need to collectivize my thoughts. I need to unify my thoughts with other folks who are also seeing wrong in the way that people are being brought up in humanity, where they're not being treated as human beings, so that we can use our united forces and work together. And so this, again, is why we push joining an organization is so important. And we have never said that you need to join our organization. We just encourage you to join in organization, any organization, preferably one that is working for justice, because that's what it's going to take for us to change the conditions that we're currently faced with. And so Assata understood that. And more importantly, the issues in New York, where Assata was born, were core to the community, but not specific to that region. So even though Assata was born in New York, and we'll talk about this in a second, Comrade wrote a book titled Assata, the autobiography, and talks in great detail in the autobiography about growing up in North Carolina with her grandparents. And so we continue to think about, this comparison. And I always love giving Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, now Assata Shakur, like these different examples of folks who are seeing these concrete challenges that Africans are facing everywhere in the world, not just on US soil, not just on African soil, not just in parts of South America, not just in parts of Canada, but no matter where these comrades are traveling or doing work or speaking at conferences or writing up memoirs or starting newspapers, it has been a common denominator that these folks have noticed that these issues that our people are suffering from are global. They are not unique to just one specific area of the world, which is why we always say that if all of the problems started with the colonization of Africa and the patriarchy behavior that Africans were showing, then that means we need to go back to that and eradicate that in order for every African everywhere to be impacted by that in a better way. And so Assata was aware of that. And like I said, it wasn't just poverty that this comrade was taking note of in New York. The comrade noticed the health threats and insecurities and health issues that were on a rise. Assata noticed the inequities of resources and European supremacy, right? And it's because of that that in Assata's words, she's quoted as saying, you know, I wanted to be a part of the Black liberation movement. I was involved with the students' rights movement. I was also involved with the movement to end the war in Vietnam. These are some examples from this comrade's words, her mouth, where she was explaining how she wanted to be a part of that organization, Black Liberation. And then she also wanted to be a part of these movements, the students' rights, the Black Panther Party organization. And then these three movements, the Black Liberation Movement, the Student Rights Movement, and the movement to end the war in Vietnam. And so again, understanding that these conditions are insufferable and dehumanizing, and finding ways to change the circumstances based on what was available, but also the art and collective power of organizing with other like-minded folks who are also interested in doing something about the conditions. Next slide, please. So we also continue to think about our comrade Assata and how, you know, the slide starts off by saying, you know, that's exactly what this comrade did, was stood up for justice multiple times. And there was one particular moment that was very pivotal in our timeline of understanding how Assata came to have the ideology, but also the perception that this person currently carries, is that, you know, this is why she had to flee the country, because she escaped from prison after being wrongfully convicted. And she was in prison for 6 years. And then she fled to Cuba. And the reason that she was wrongfully convicted is because the European system, for lack of a better term, systems of oppression and everything bubbled into that, was already trying to target and attack the Black Panther Party, COINTELPRO, FBI, all of that. And I just told you that she became a member. And so they were already watching all of those comrades, those ancestors, very, very closely. And so Assata was pulled over during a traffic stop in New Jersey in May of 1973 and was accused of killing a European cop. And that's why she was wrongfully accused, and that's why she was arrested, and that's why she went to prison. And I say that she was in prison for 6 years because I want you to understand that for 6 years, she was tortured and had to deal with nonsense and, you know, inhumane situations. And she was able to escape, and she fled to Cuba. And I always am just so grateful to think about that, because again, like, these are not the narratives that get made into the books that we turn around and teach our children. So it's up to us to understand why we need to share that information with our children, why we need to help them understand what's going on. Because this person was very clear that she didn't have to put up with that. And not only was she wrongfully accused, but she was also tired of the US, which I definitely understand that. So Assata left and went to Cuba. And, you know, this third bullet talks about her book, which again, if you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend you read it. And then if you've read it already, maybe it's time you read it again. I know I picked it up when I was a young teenager, and a lot of it went over my head. But now as an adult, I was able to process it a lot differently. I also think that as a cis African woman, I was able to process it a lot differently. And I definitely understood many, many, many of the analogies, but also just the way her play on words and just how she chose to write the book. So strongly recommend you read that if you have not. But I bring the book up to say this, you know, this book was published in 1987. And so just to give us some context, this book was published 3 years after Comrade Assata arrived in Cuba. So that means that Assata has been in Cuba for close to 40 years. And get this, you all, this comrade is still contributing to the movement and the organizations to this day, still contributing to that. 40 years plus later, still understanding that it is important to stand up for what's right, still taking risk and standing up for what's right, even though there is a strong opportunity that you might be seen as unpopular when you do that. That's what this comrade is doing. You know, Assata has a website, and her words are saying right at the top, I have advocated and still advocate for revolutionary changes. And so that's how we know that this system is unable to stop those folks who are completely devoted to their principles. And this is why we push that line as well. Not only do you all need to join organizations that are working for justice, but you need to continue to learn how to be committed to your principles. Because if you have principles that are unwavering, and if you're not willing to fall for anything, then that means nobody can change your ideology, which is one of the strongest and most impenetrable things that you have is your ideology. That's your brain power. That's what motivates you to be who you are and to think the way you do. So you shouldn't just allow people to so easily influence you. My grandmother used to say that, don't be so easily influenced or easily confused. But really, in this day, like, it's like, you shouldn't be so easily confused, because you should be able to stand by your principle and understand what gets you out of bed every day, what drives you, what develops your morals, how do you build your values, what is it that you do to have backline and to have base on all of that, right? Because whatever it is, it has to work for you in order for you to be justified as a human being, because there are going to be countless people who are going to critique that, right? They're going to come at you and say all these things are wrong with you, and why are you a vegan, or why do you call yourself an African? You're not an African. Constant people who are going to critique that. So you're going to have to be confident in who you are and be able to explain it to people. Otherwise, what's the point of having values if you can't defend them and stand up for them? So Assata showed us that example, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, this comrade has been in Cuba for 40 years, y'all, and is still doing the work, still doing the work. And that's just blowing my mind, because again, even in the book Assata, comrades talks about the experiences they faced in New York, but also in North Carolina, and just drawing those comparisons with that. And so I just want to close with this. For those that are unaware, I love how Assata breaks down the meaning of their name on the website. So the word Assata actually means she who struggles, which I think is so appropriate. Her middle name, Olugbala, Olugbala, for the people, and then last name Shakur, the thankful one. And so again, this idea of understanding that you have no reason to be apologetic, because if you believe in something and you understand that you can show evidence as to why what you're saying is truth, and that's based on justice and principle, then you have nothing to be ashamed of. And I think her middle name definitely speaks to that. Olugbala, for the people. That literally means this comrade chose to carry around the people with her every single day because she chose that name. Assata, she who struggles. That means that she welcomes challenges that come and she faces them on head on. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from this comrade. There is so much that we can learn from this comrade. And then Shakur, the thankful one. You always need to have humility with you. There is always more to learn. There is always more that you can do differently. There is always so much more that can be happening to contribute to the struggle. That means that the conditions for others can be different if you're able to be willing to learn and grow. You're never going to know everything, unfortunately, until you die, because you still have the rest of your life to change your ideology and to make it stronger and better. And if you choose to be humble, it'll help you, because there's so much information out there. And I just hope that I can cover all of it before I die. So I'll leave you all with Assata's website, www.asatashakur.org. Again, www.asatashakur.org. And I will put it in the Zoom chat as well. You all continue to learn from this ancestor and this comrade. And I say ancestor, even though we are so grateful this comrade is still with us. But I do see their spirit as being with us even before they were born. And I see some of that being reincarnated and recycled, because this ancestor definitely has some traits that we've seen from other folks and is bringing a lot of that out in terms of the work that they're still doing, the ways that they're trying to contribute while still trying to stay safe and not allow for US imperialist capitalist country to win. And so join an organization working for justice, commit to your principles, and start today. with not backing down. Start today with what that looks like. Take a risk and be unpopular. Because if we haven't learned anything from these 123 episodes, we've learned that when you are risky and unpopular, that's when change occurs. And so at the end of the day, do you want people to follow you because you want social capital, or do you want actual conditions for humanity to change? If you're choosing for conditions to change, then there are going to be people who are not going to like you, and you're going to have to be okay with that. And you might struggle with it at first, because I know I did, but now I'm at a point where I understand everything I do is for the people, and everything the people do is for me. And I'm so humbled to know that the people have my back and they want me to be successful and to take the baton and pass it on. And I hope that I can pass it to the children that are coming after me. And I hope that we can continue on, because we all have a responsibility, every single one of us. None of us are here just because we got here because we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. Every single one of us had ancestors who risked death and rape and murder and robbery so that they could exist and survive and be here. And if we do nothing else, our job is to make the world better for the children to come, because our ancestors literally died so that we can do that. These are people you haven't even met, and they put their lives on the line for you. So we have to humble ourselves and remind ourselves of that. The struggle continues. Join an organization working for justice, and don't be afraid to commit to your values and risk being unpopular.
Medasi, Rudiana, and thank you for that opening to this very important topic, talking about our sister Assata. And I'm just going to continue on and talk to you all about Sister Assata from the context of it. In 1969, it became quite clear to virtually everyone within the Black Panther Party that their organization was littered with police sabotage and constant surveillance. And so because of that, the underground, the movement underground, that a lot of people believe the Black Liberation Army emerged as a result of police repression against the Black Panther Party, but the Black Liberation Army, the underground for the movement, existed long before that. And so what the police surveillance did do is create an environment where the prevalence of the underground became greater, and more, because more and more people had to join it because they were no longer able to operate above ground. And so that's where that reality pushed many within the Panther Party underground into that underground network. Assata Shakur was one of those people. If you read her book, like Shakur mentioned, she talked about the signs that she got in 1969 as to what was happening to change her life. Like the fact she didn't pay her phone bill for 7 or 8 months and the phone remained on was clear evidence to her that her phone was on so that people could listen to who she was talking to. There are a number of things, number of examples she names in the book that led her to understand what was happening with her life. And so once she was forced to follow this pathway, you know, she became affiliated primarily through police propaganda with the Black Liberation Army, right? And as Shakur mentioned, Sister Assata ended up in Cuba in 1984. But what happened is on November 2nd, 1979, a coalition of revolutionaries who called themselves the May 19th Communist Organization. May 19th, you know, of course, is the born day of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. It's also the born day of Min Aung Thach, who is more commonly known as Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Viet Minh resistance that obliterated American imperialism in the 10-year war with Vietnam from mid-60s to 1975. And also the born day for Yuri Kochiyama, the Japanese activist who joined Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity in Harlem in New York and gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So because of the contributions of all of these wonderful warriors, this May 19th Communist Organization, which was made up of revolutionaries from the Black Panther Party, from the Black Liberation Army, from the Weather Underground, and people like Marilyn Buck, the European woman who was my auntie and my mentor were a part of the May 19th communist organization. Matulu Shakur was a part of that organization. There are other people who are still alive who are part of that organization. I'm not going to name them. If you don't know who they are, you got to get more engaged in the movement and you'll find out. Kamal Siddiqui was one of the people involved. Kawasi Balagoon, who not that long ago made this physical transition, was one of the people involved. And so they organized and carried out Assata's escape from the Clinton Correctional Facility in New Jersey. Now, this is important to stop and talk about for a moment, because we're talking about some people who organized a prison break in one of the most maximum security prisons in the US. And I need you to sit with that for a minute, because a lot of people out here would say, well, hey, you can't, that would never be able to do nothing like that because you've been trained so well by the master. Anything the master sets up that they don't want you to have, you believe you'll never have. But some of us don't believe that. You know, I was at Pan-African Women's Day in Los Angeles yesterday, and we were talking about our solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party. They were raided by the FBI because the FBI said they had engaged in ongoing communications with a Russian agent. And they admit that they had conversations with this person. But the point we were making, we weren't making any judgment for or against the African People's Socialist Party or anything like that. Our point is that as African revolutionaries, as African activists, we will determine who we talk to. And certainly the imperialist United States government will never tell us, oh, you can't talk to Libya. You can't go to Libya. You can't talk to Cuba. You can't go to Cuba. You can't talk to Russia. They can't tell us a damn thing about who we talk to. Because unlike so many people out here, we're not their slaves any longer. We will do what's in the best interest of our people. And we're not afraid to live out the consequences for doing that. So that's what these comrades in the May 19th Communist Organization did, is they organized without fear, and they created a plan, and they carried out that plan to perfection to liberate Sister Assata from that maximum security prison. Now, you know, there are always sacrifices, and the sacrifices were Kawasi Balagoon had to serve time. Matulu Shakur is still in prison, partially because of charges connected to not only the 1981 Brinks robbery, because the Black Liberation Army was engaged in taking money from the US banks and using that money for liberation. Now, for a lot of you with slave mentality, you're like, oh, they robbed banks. They should have gone to prison. But you can't name a damn bank in this country that didn't get started because it invested in the enslavement of our people. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, all of them, Paceman, and they all started from enslaving, from investing in the enslavement of our ancestors. So since I know that, there's no way in hell you're going to convince me that if some of us decide to rob a bank, there's something that's reparations, as far as I'm concerned, especially if they use it for the movement. That's exactly what that is. So I don't think any crime was committed when they tried to take down the Brinks truck, but partially for that, as well as for being accused of aiding and abetting the escape of Sister Assata Shakur. Matulu Shakur is still in prison today. And Marilyn Buck, of course, was arrested and did 33 years behind that before she made her physical transition in 2010. And David Gilbert, another European comrade, was arrested and is still in prison today behind these charges. And I'm saying this because, again, some of us sit here, I mean, we're so soaked with ignorance. Well, I don't know, white people are the devil. And I don't anybody that's working with some white people, they ain't really down for our people. And the people that talk like that with no class analysis, and we talked about the importance of class analysis last week. So you should look at the video if you missed it. But people who have no class analysis make comments like that. And these people gave their lives, Marilyn Buck, David Gilbert, for our sister, for our struggle. And the people talking like that haven't given 5 minutes of sacrifice for the people, haven't given $5 to contribute to the people's struggle. So I ask you, who should I listen to? Should I listen to Auntie Marilyn Buck? Should I listen to David Gilbert? Should I listen to you You haven't made a single sacrifice for the masses or people. Never in your life have you made a single 2-second sacrifice for it. I'm not going to listen to you. You don't have any credibility. So these comrades risked everything and paid a price so that our sister could get out of prison. And I knew Marilyn Buck very well. I used to visit her in prison all the time. And she told me she was proud if they had her in prison for helping, as she called her, Sister A. If they had her in prison for helping Sister A, she was proud of that. She barely knew Assata Shakur. They met once, she told me. But she was proud of that. She was not ashamed to be in prison for that because she understood that by them doing what they did and helping Assata escape, it served as an inspiration to millions of people that we can go up against US imperialism and we can win. And that is the reason why they want Assata Shakur so badly, y'all. You've got to understand that. That is the reason they want her. As a 76-year-old woman, that is the reason why they will pull out all stops to get this 76-year-old woman, because they don't want, it's not about her. They know that she doesn't pose any threat to them in that regard, but they don't want you to be inspired by her example. That's why they're still after Assata Shakur today. And we just commemorated this weekend, 76th birthday, as a matter of fact. So know about that. But those 5 years that she was underground, she surfaced in Cuba in 1984. And the Cuban Revolution, you should know, has a long history of supporting African freedom fighters and African liberation. And I say this, and I say it all the time, we'll continue to say it, we have to stop and pay homage to the Cuban Revolution, because there are a lot of coons and Negroes and sellouts and fascists and cowards out here and apologists for capitalism that will love to latch on and vomit out right-wing, reactionary, anti-communist propaganda and will want to say all these negative things about Comrade Fidel Castro and parrot what's on the capitalist news media about Comrade Fidel Castro, about Comrade Ernesto Che Guevara, about Comrade Celia Sanchez, about Comrade Vilma Espin, and all of the comrades of the Cuban Revolution before and today, and about the Cuban Revolution today, about the president, about all of the people in the National Assembly, anything to do with the Cuban Revolution. There are people who love to parrot out this anti-communist propaganda. So what we want to make sure we say every single time that we possibly can is that African people everywhere on earth owe the Cuban Revolution. It doesn't matter whether you know it or not, you owe the Cuban Revolution because they have always been there for African people. And I know so many of us, whatever we know about Cuba, if NBC, CBS, CIA didn't say it, we don't know anything else. But the truth is, we owe the Cuban Revolution. Because if you study the Cuban Revolution, they understand. Fidel Castro said years ago, African blood flows through my veins. And what he was saying, he wasn't trying to appropriate African culture when he said that. What he was saying is an acknowledgement that Cuba is a country that was penetrated and suffered the legacy of the African slave trade. And that as a result, there are millions of African people. Today, Cuba is 70% African people. And so this is what Fidel was talking about. And because of that understanding that he had and that the Cuban Revolution has, they made it a priority to recognize their connection to Africa and African people. So from as early as the mid-1960s, when Robert Williams was forced to flee this country because of his work in the NAACP in North Carolina, and because the feds and all the white supremacist groups were after him, he was able to find refuge in Cuba. When Eldridge Cleaver unfortunately engaged in adventurous activities in 1968 in Oakland, California, and fled the US, he was able to find refuge in Cuba. Now, of course, he was forced to leave Cuba because the Cubans realized quickly what kind of contradictions Eldridge offered, but he was initially able to find refuge in Cuba. Huey P. Newton was able to live in Cuba for 3 years, finding refuge because of charges against him, and so many other members of the African liberation movement from a number of organizations, the Black Panther Party, the Revolutionary Action Movement, the Republic of New Africa, all of these organizations were able to find refuge in Cuba. And Assata Shakur was just one of the more recent beneficiaries of this. She was welcomed and given political asylum in Cuba, which means she could live there forever. And as Shakur said, she has done so for the last 40 something years. But not only individuals in the African liberation movement, the Cuban people have sacrificed so much for Africa. When all of Southern Africa was on the verge of being overrun by racist apartheid in the late 80s, nobody in the world answered the call. Nobody in the world answered the call. Libya did what they could. Guinea did what they could, but those were small countries without a whole lot to offer. But Cuba sent 500,000 Cuban troops to Southern Africa to beat back the racists in Angola, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, South Africa. And they did that. And if they had not done that, those racist mercenaries would have taken over all of South Africa and made apartheid the rule of the day in Southern Africa. And they would have tried to expand to the entire African continent to do that. And it was the Cuban Revolution that stopped them from doing that. 500,000 troops. They lost thousands of people in Southern Africa. And this was all facilitated by Che Guevara's mission in the Congo in 1964, where they tried to beat back imperialist forces, neo-colonial forces who had betrayed the efforts by the National Congolese movement and Patrice Lumumba. Che Guevara was there to do what they could to try to resurrect that Lumumba's movement. They were not successful, but they laid the foundation for the 500,000 Cuban troops that came to Southern Africa several years later. And because of their effort, they forced the racist regime in Pretoria, South Africa. They forced the Zionist government in Israel. They forced the backward capitalist United States government to compromise based on Cuba's valiant fighting efforts in Southern Africa. And it was because of Cuba that Angola was able to move forward to their independence. Mozambique was able to move forward to theirs, warding off the Portuguese and running those cowards and those thugs out of those countries. And Namibia was able to be independent, largely because of Cuba's efforts. Nelson Mandela was freed from prison as a condition for Cuban troops leaving Southern Africa. You didn't learn that in school. They don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that without Cuba's assistance, Nelson Mandela would be dead in prison. You didn't even know that. But that's what the Cuban Revolution contributed to our people, to Africa. And what did Cuba get for all of those efforts? They got nothing. They didn't get any aid. They didn't get anything from Africa. Africa had nothing to give. They got nothing for that. That's how you can know when somebody is revolutionary. But if you don't know that history, then you will, when CBS and CIA come on TV and they're talking about, well, Fidel Castro was a dictator and the Cuban Revolution, there's no rights. Well, you don't know any better, so you go out and vomit the same thing. Well, the Cuban Revolution, it's violent. Nobody has any right. You believe that nonsense because you don't know any better. You haven't taken the time to learn for yourself. Nobody can be a dictator when they engage in all this work and they don't get any benefit from it. The very definition of a dictator is someone who steals a country's resources for their own benefit. That's what a dictator is. That's the precise definition of a dictator. Fidel Castro did none of that. Everything that he did was for the betterment of humanity, for the betterment of privileged people in society, in South America, in the Caribbean, in Central America. Because not only did Cuba do what they did in Southern Africa, they did the same thing in Central America. They backed the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and paid a tremendous price for that. They backed the liberation movement in El Salvador and paid a tremendous price for that. They backed the people of Grenada when the U.S. invaded Grenada in 1983. They got nothing for none of that. So don't come to us talking about, well, they're dictators or dictators. No, you're an idiot because you don't even understand what a dictator is. A dictator is not someone who gives everything they can to contribute to humanity. That's what these people have always done in the Cuban Revolution. So we are thankful, and you better not come to us talking that nonsense about Fidel, Che, and the Cuban Revolution, because we will blow you down with that nonsense. We are forever indebted to the people of Cuba. And one of the many things they've done for Africa and her children is inviting our sister Assata Shakur to come there and seek refuge. And so let's talk about what's happening with Assata Shakur today, because one of the things that happens is that, again, we don't study history, we don't know anything, and we rely on our enemies for all the information that we get. I mean, that is all a terrible formula that never works out. We wonder why we're in the situation we're in, and we're relying on our enemies for our information. So let's talk about from the time Assata arrived in Cuba. She had a job, y'all. Most of you don't know this, so we're going to give you this understanding of what's happening with our system. She had a job working for the Cuban Revolution, because socialist revolutions employ people. They don't prosper in unemployment like capitalist systems. So she went to Cuba and she got a job. Her job was working for the Cuban Institute of Friends, the Cuban Institute of Friends. The role of that organization, the Cuban Institute of Friends, is to engage the public and educate them about the Cuban Revolution, because they understand that everything you know about the Cuban Revolution is misinformation. And they know that. And so they want to provide you with accurate information about what they're doing in their revolution. So Sister Assata worked for them, and her job was to meet delegations that came to Cuba and spend time with them and help them understand what the Cuban Revolution was about. So it was because she worked for the Cuban Institute of Friends that when Shakur's mom went to Cuba in 1993, she was able to meet and hang out with Sister Assata Shakur. That is the reason why the next year, 1994, when I went to Cuba, I was able to meet and hang out with Sister Assata Shakur. That's why I was able to interview her. They had all these European media people there and wanted to interview her. She said, no, I'm going to let my revolutionary brother talk to me on tape. And it's on YouTube. It's called Assata Shakur Talks About Socialism in Cuba. It's a 40-minute informal discussion where I talked. I'm not a journalist, I'm an African revolutionary, but I talked to her about socialism in Cuba, and she's talking about it. We're sitting in the Federation of Cuban Women in Havana, Cuba, and I'm interviewing her and just asking her questions. I mean, the questions I could think of, and talking to her, because that was her role there. And she wanted us to come back. She said, as long as you agree to show the video to people, it's no problem. We can talk as long as you want. And before I was able to convert that video, I showed it to hundreds of people. Now thousands of people have watched it. You can go on there and see it for yourself. It's on YouTube. It's been up there for a couple of years now since I converted it. So that's what she was doing in Cuba. And that's why almost everybody that went to Cuba up through the 2000s got a chance to meet Sister Assata and hang out with her, because that was part of her job there. But what you have to understand is what you see on the left-hand side of the page, right? What happened is that the capitalist system, again, they don't want you to be inspired by people who stand up against them, because if they allow you to understand that there are people who stood up against them and won, like Sister Assata did, then you will start to believe that maybe you can do the same thing. And that spells the end for the capitalist system. So they have to continue to make you believe that they're invincible. There's nothing you can do but submit to them. And the best you can do is just try to get a house out of the deal, get a new car, get a nice stereo, buy some weed, and that's the best you can do. There's no way you can defeat capitalism, because no one will ever do it. And if they have too many examples like Assata out there, then at some point the house, the car, and the weed is no longer going to be enough for you. You're going to want more, because believe me, there is much more to life than those things. And you can begin to see the potential for us having a higher level of life and existence. So that's why they come after people like Assata Shakur, it's hard as they do. So what happened several years ago, everybody going to Cuba, like myself, like Shakur's mom, meeting Assata, coming back, doing the things I did. I know I earned a call from the FBI. They wanted the footage that I got in Cuba of it. They said, well, you have footage. They called me in 1994. They said, you have footage of Joanna Chesimar. He introduced himself. I said, well, I don't know who that is. You know, because they like to play that game. Like one of the things they want to do is deny us our African identity. So what they always do is deny you. People do it to me. You know, I have one name, Ajamu Umi. Whatever name I was born from, that is not any name that I have any legal usage of or non-legal or any usage whatsoever of there. And I haven't for damn near 40 years. All right. So sometimes people will say, like I'm dealing with a family situation now, and people will say, oh, that was your name. So that's your name. And I'm like, no, that was my name. This is my name now. I'm just showing you that so we can get this paperwork out the way. You can understand that that was once my name. And so let's move forward. But this is my passport name is a John Umi. My ID name is that. I don't have any other kind of name. So they don't want to acknowledge that. So like you have video footage of Joanne Chesimar. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I mean, well, Assata Shakur, whatever her name is. I'm like, yeah, I don't have anything to say to you. Well, can you send us that footage? I don't have anything to say to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, we know you have the footage. I'm like, well, if you know I have it, then you know I'm not sending it to you. So y'all do what y'all do. Come and raid my house, do whatever you want. And for 6 months, I carried that tape with me. There were 2 tapes. I carried them with me everywhere I went because I was afraid they would come and break in my house and try to steal them. And I never sent them to them. I waited several years and I went to visit Marilyn Buck, and she suggested, well, hold on to it for a few years. And then after several years, then publish it and put it out there. So that's exactly what I did. And I did that. And it's been out there ever since. And I'm saying it now, but I don't give a damn what they do with that information. But my point is that tells you how much they want our sister Assata Shakur. So this article on the left-hand side of the screen talks about, it's from 2019, and it talks about Trump return woman convicted in trooper's death. Now, you know, Trump, when he was president, demanded that Cuba return Assata Shakur because of the death of that cracker cop. And, you know, they're just the absurdity of that. You know, why would Cuba listen to Donald Trump? Why would they listen to Barack Obama? Why would they listen to any of them? This country has done nothing for 60 plus years except attempt to destroy the Cuban Revolution through the economic blockade, but also through just undermining efforts to undermine the Cuban Revolution through any means necessary. We can go on all day explaining to you how they've done that through Radio Marti, through the U.S. Information Agency, through all of these efforts designed, Radio Free America, to spread negative propaganda to the Cuban people. They violate Cuban airspace on the regular. They bombed Cuba through the so-called Cuban National American Foundation, a reactionary terrorist lobbyist organization based in Miami, Florida. They engage in all these efforts to sabotage the Cuban people. So why would the Cuban people listen to Donald Trump or any of those clowns in the White House? But they upped the bounty on Assata Shakur's head. It was $1 million for years. You can go in any post office and see it in there. It's still up there. They have her under Joanna Chesimar because, again, they're not going to recognize our African identity. Now, the bounty is $2 billion. That's what it is today. They upped it to $2 billion bounty for, $1 million. That's $2 million for anyone who could bring Assata Shakur back to this country, living or dead. That's what the bounty says, if you read it. And so what this has unleashed, think about January 6th in this country. Think about all these terrorist organizations that operate with impunity in this country. The Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, every police department in every city and town in this country, the US military, the National Guard, all of these terrorist organizations, because that's what they are, is terrorist organizations. That's exactly what they are. I don't care if your daddy's in it, your brother, your mama, your sister, or that you're in it. It's a terrorist organization. That's what you're in. And that makes you a terrorist as long as you're a part of that. So all of these terrorist organizations, they think about these people. So these now travel to Cuba is easier than what it's been before because there's so many other countries that are getting tired, not because of anything happening here. So don't misinterpret my words in saying, well, Obama did this, so now you can travel easy. No, that's not true. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that other countries like Mexico, for example, or Canada, they're sick of the US illogical economic blockade against Cuba. So they have relaxed their standards. They're no longer lining up behind whatever the US tells them to do. And so now it's much easier to go through those countries, Panama, anywhere you go, Puerto Rico, and get to Cuba than it used to be. So now a lot more people can get down there. Now people go there on vacation now. And this makes it easier for all of those terrorist entities that I just mentioned to get to Cuba. So because of this and this $2 million bounty on Sister Assata's head, it no longer is safe for her to be out greeting every clown that comes to Cuba. We don't know who's an actual revolutionary, who's a terrorist clown coming to Cuba. So it would no longer be feasible or safe for her to be out there working for the Cuban Institute of Friends, for her to be receiving people she doesn't know that come into the country. So the Cuban Revolution, understanding that, pulled her back several years ago and has her under close guard to protect her life, because there have been attempts in Cuba against her life. We know this because we have a relationship with the Cuban Revolution. We're not like you. We don't rely on the Miami Herald to give us information about the Cuban Revolution. We don't rely on Barack Obama or Donald Trump or Donald Duck to give us information about the Cuban Revolution. We know because of our relationships with those revolutionaries that her life is in danger there. Because any clown, any coward in this country who has a firearm can figure out a way to sneak it down there and do harm to our sisters. So she is no longer in the public eye because the Cuban Revolution has a history of protecting our revolutionaries. So if you want to know where Assata Shakur is today, she's being safeguarded by the Cuban Revolution, as she should. And if you don't believe that, because some of you, if it's not coming from US imperialism, it's impossible for you to believe it. The only way you can believe something is if the master, the white master says, if they don't have their hands on the statement, then there's no way you can believe it, because you can't believe anything that doesn't come from the master. So if you don't believe that, just think about it like this. Assata has family here in the US. She has a daughter that graduated from Spelman College. She has an aunt, Evelyn Williams, who wrote a book about Assata Shakur. She's an attorney. She was Assata's lawyer while Assata was in Cuba. Very active today, very involved in Assata's work. They go and visit Assata all the time, her family does. They would be the first person speaking out if the Cuban government was somehow preventing Assata Shakur from being out there and living her life. They're not doing that. In fact, they have, if you dig deep enough, they have acknowledged that Assata's life is in danger. And they are thankful to the Cuban Revolution for protecting her. They are thankful to them and the Cuban Revolution, they don't play. You know, they made 600 attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro. And the reason why they didn't succeed is because, unlike most of us out here, they're not playing games. They're serious about their security apparatus. So no, nobody knows where Assata Shakur is. How are you going to be safe when it's leaking every day where you are? They're not on discipline like people here. They know how to keep somebody safe there. That's why they can't mess with them that way. But the important thing to understand about that is the capitalist system wants to manipulate your ignorance by telling you, well, the reason why you don't know where Assata Shakur is because she criticized the Cuban Revolution, and because of that, they have her under house arrest. That's the lie that the CIA is putting out there. And some of you believe it because you believe everything they say. And we're here to tell you today that that has nothing to do with it. We are extremely familiar with the Cuban Revolution. People that live in Cuba give solid critiques of the Cuban Revolution every day of their lives. They participate in the committees for defense of revolution. And I've been to those meetings when I was in Cuba, and I observed people engaging in principal criticism against the Cuban Revolution and engaging in action to correct the problems that they're criticizing. That's the nature of a revolutionary process. But if you don't know anything about revolution, you don't understand that. All you know is bourgeois electoral politics, the capitalist system, and you can say whatever you want here as long as nobody's listening, and nobody is listening to you. So you think that that's freedom, but the minute somebody listens to you, you find out how little freedom you have in this so-called democracy. You don't believe that? Ask Malcolm X, ask Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he didn't pick up a gun and shoot nobody. He was just talking. He was giving inspiration, and this government killed him. So don't come to us with that nonsense. Well, you have freedom of speech in this country. You don't have that in Cuba. You sound like an absolute airhead idiot when you say that knows nothing. If I set a match to your head, it would blow out because of all the cold ice between your ears. That's what you sound like. So you don't know anything about the Cuban Revolution if that's what you believe. Don't believe the lies of the capitalist system. Our sister Assata is safe in Cuba, and she will be safe, and she will be protected there as long as is necessary. And when if revolution were to come to the United States of America tomorrow, and this were to become a socialist country, you would see Assata Shakur here the next day. So just understand that whatever you hear from the capitalist system, and Malcolm X told us, you should seek a better answer somewhere else. Don't believe their lies. Our sister Assata is safe. She has to be protected from all of these goons and cowards and fools and clowns here who would do anything to gain status within the white supremacist movement by coming back and having done harm to our sister. We don't want that to happen. We want her protected, and we are thankful to the Cuban Revolution for doing that. Most of you who criticize the Cuban Revolution wouldn't extend a pinky nail protecting a liberation fighter for African freedom and determination. So we don't want to hear nothing you have to say about any of this. We love the Cuban Revolution, and we're thankful to them for helping and assisting and safeguarding our sister Assata Shakur. The Cuban Revolution is doing what they've always done, protecting revolutionaries. And a lot of us out here are doing what we've always done, run our mouths like diarrhea boo-boo with nothing to say worth listening to. So we are thankful to the Cuban Revolution, and we ask you to join us next week, August 21st, where we're going to talk about the Revolutionary Act of breastfeeding. Don't think, well, man, I don't have to tune in for that one. I'll just let that one go. You should want to have that participation more than anybody, because we're talking about how to keep our children healthy and safe. And that's all of our responsibility. So join us next week, same time, Our Ancestors' Voices for that program. Go to the APRP Forward Ever shop and buy everything on it. We're adding materials every day. If you've already bought something, buy something else. Support the African Revolution. Nobody else will do it if you do it. You know, you say you want to support independent African organization, there's a great opportunity. You can't just do it once. You don't just go to the supermarket once. You don't just go to Shell once. You go there 3 or 4 times a week. So support our movement for justice, please. There's a link there to do that. Go to aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go there, donate there, give support to the APRP. Go to betterworld.me. This video will be housed there a good 20 minutes after we conclude right now, and you can forward it to other people. So we ask you to do that and look at everything that's there. Hoodcommunist.org. We certainly ask you to do that. We'll have a bi-monthly Telegram event coming up. We want you to participate every Thursday with new articles that we put out. All of our programs are there on the bottom, all of the APRP programs. We ask you, please, to participate and support those programs and let people know. And please continue to buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The time is now, you all. We are getting organized. If you love Sister Assata Shakur, you should follow her example. as Shakur said, you should get organized. We thank you for this time with us today. We ask you to share this message, share all of these messages from all of our programs that we work with, and to continue to organize. Victory is certain. We will win. Forward ever, backwards never. Smash patriarchy. It's got to go. Capitalism, you already know, it's got to go. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening.